Well, we're live now.
Okay, guys, live over welcome to the Astro Imaging channel.
There's Eric's space. Come on, guys, let's act like we know what we're doing. Bye. You got it, Toga.
Okay. So, welcome to the Astro Imaging channel. This week, Eric Coles is going to show us how to do mosaics with using PixInsight and some Photoshop tools. And then if we have time left afterwards, I'm going to be talking about some challenges of remote imaging. And so we'll go from there. And in the meantime, if you guys have any questions, you can post on the chat on the website, astroimagingchannel.com, theastroimagingchannel.com, and post your questions over there, and then we'll pass them on to the presenter. So, Eric, are you ready?
I'm ready. You going to pass me the screen, or?
You just share your screen and go.
Share the screen. All right. Can you see your screen?
Yes.
Alex? So we're going to do a brief introduction to the Gradient Merge Mosaic tool in PixInsight. And it's by far and away the most excellent way to do mosaics. But there are a couple of tricks and things that I might do a little bit differently than some of the videos you might see online. And I'm going to illustrate first how to do just a two-panel mosaic with the California Nebula, and then show you how that same technique might be applicable to doing a four-panel mosaic. Now, two-panel mosaics are fairly easy. Four-panel mosaics probably go up by a factor of the log of 4, and 16-panel mosaics are insane. Will probably take you a month to do. So let's concentrate on those things that we can actually do. So the other day I did a two-panel of the California mosaic, or the California Nebula. So I'm going to open those two right now. Move this over here. So here is the upper portion of the California Nebula, and here's the lower portion. And theoretically, they should really merge quite nicely, almost without any technique at all. But in fact, even when you don't change the rotation angle of your telescope, there will be a little differences, and they won't be quite perfect. So let me see if I can make... So the first thing you do if you want to do a mosaic in PixInsight is you have to get a reference image. That is an image where both of the parts of the mosaic are going to be aligned with, and that you can use then to use the Gradient Merge Mosaic tool. So for example, you can make that reference image by simply using the star alignment tool. And I'm going to select the... Oh, by the way, these are linear images that I'm using. You can do the same thing with nonlinear images. But for the purpose of moving it into Photoshop, it's really easier for me if I do work with linear images. So I'm going to select the upper part of the California Nebula as my reference. Select reference, upper. And I'm going to build a reference image by using the not register matched images, but register union mosaic. That will build a reasonably good mosaic, but not perfect, and I'll show you that. Drag it over, drop it on the lower part. Give it about 30 seconds. And now we have what looks like a pretty good mosaic using just a register union mosaic. But if you look closely, let me zoom in on this. You'll see that it's an imperfect mosaic. It's not, we didn't get the nebulosity well integrated here. And it's just really put them together in a way which one leads into the other, but you don't have any overlap, you don't have any gradient applied to this, and it does look like two different pictures. And this line, whether you can see it across or not, runs all the way across this union mosaic. But we're going to make this to a full frame. But the interesting part of this is that you can use this as a reference image. So if I now, this is my reference image, the crude mosaic. If I now let's see, lower union mosaic, I'll use that as my reference. And if I now select registered matched images, put it into the upper, I will get a match which includes the top and then kind of the black area underneath. It shouldn't take very long. Okay, so now we have one of the reference images that we used in the gradient merge mosaic to build the final mosaic. Now I'll take my lower part using the registered matched images and match that as well. I got this on the fast computer, so it really shouldn't take very long. And there we go. So there we don't need this image anymore. We don't need this one. And we don't need our reference image here anymore. So these are the two images that will be used with the gradient merge mosaic. And I'm going to save this as CA California Upper. So we'll save this. California Upper. I've done this once, make sure it works. Yes, we're going to replace it. 16-bit. And I'll save this as California Lower. California Lower registered. And I actually saved this under the wrong name. Let's do this again. Save as California Upper registered. 16-bit. Now I don't need either one of these images, and I can use the gradient merge mosaic tool. So now I'll put in the registered images on the top part of the mosaic and on the bottom part of the mosaic. I'll add those two files. Here they are. There are apparently two ways you can do the mosaic. One is this average, and one is the overlay. I've done them both. They both seem to operate about the same. In this case, I'm going to use the average. And I just hit the Apply Global. And this takes about 30 seconds to run. And it will produce a perfect mosaic. It's working on it. A few more seconds, and here's our mosaic. And you see, in this case, there is really no line in here. It is a perfect mosaic. You can't see the interface. But since they weren't perfectly aligned, I'm going to simply crop this to get my final image. And there it is. This is the image that I will further process in PixInsight, take it into Photoshop, and the result will be, I'll bring that up. This would be the finished image. We're not going to do that here. Finished image. And there's the finished image after all the processing. So that's just a simple 2-panel mosaic just using PixInsight. But there's another way to do it, and I'll illustrate that because it is also applicable to a 4-panel mosaic. So let's close this. We don't need this. And I'm going to go over to Photoshop. No, we don't need that image.
So before you go on, I have a question.
Sure.
So what is the major difference between what you have done here and then what David Ault demonstrated I guess a year or two ago? He used a generated star mask, and you used your own images as your, not star mask, I'm sorry, registered image. And you used your own images as your base. Is that the only difference?
Well, you mean as a reference image? You can use, I don't know what David did back then, but you can use the register union mosaic as a way to come up with your reference image. And that seems the easiest using just PixInsight. Now, if you do have another image which happens to cover the same territory, you can use that as a reference image. But I think this is the most precise reference image that you should be using. Register union mosaic. That'll produce your reference image. Then you match up your upper and lower, or whatever you want to call them, to that registered union mosaic reference image, and then end up doing the gradient merge mosaic. So let me go over to Photoshop, close this. Nope. So now I'm going to open up let's say, let's open up this one. So that's the lower part of the California Nebula. Now I can make a reference image here simply by changing the size of this particular image. So for example, if I change the canvas size and make it, let's say 7,000 pixels, and make it expand upwards, and fit it into my window, this becomes my reference image that I can use in PixInsight. Now this is more applicable to a 4-panel than it is a 2, but I'll just illustrate it here. So now I can save this as CA lower, and I'll call this reference 2. As a TIFF file. And now I can open this up in PixInsight. Reference 2. And I can use this as a reference for the 2 other images that we started with. CA lower and CA up. Whoops, let's use the control. You know what I did? I actually copied over that. Now let's ignore that for a while. So this is now my reference image. And I can take the lower one, star alignment will be the lower reference 2. So now there is my lower California Nebula reference to here. It looks the same, but it really isn't. It's slightly tilted. There's a little bit of rotation in this. You don't see it on this reference. And then you do the same thing with the upper, which I think I've kind of messed up, but let's realign that. close this. I don't need this. So now I have my upper and my lower, and I will save it just like I did before. And I will then put them into the gradient merge mosaic and produce another mosaic. So in this case, instead of making a reference image using register union mosaic, I just took one of the elements for the mosaic. I just expanded it in PixInsight. I registered both the top and the bottom with that reference image, and then used a gradient merge mosaic to produce the mosaic. And you get a similar result. So it seems like if you just, I'm sorry, you got a question?
Yeah, there's it's a point to be made. You've got a pretty high resolution monitor that's going out to everybody. And while we can see where you're going and generally what you're doing, we can't necessarily read exactly what you clicked on. So could you make sure that whenever you say that I'm going to take this here or something like that, you tell us which process you're using so that we can come back and get it later?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure. I'm sorry about
Thanks.
that. You're right. I do have a high
okay.
resolution monitor. So what happens if you got a 4-panel mosaic? Let me close this. I took one of the upper parts of the California image and I divided it into 4 parts. Now that's not the same. Cannot close it. Oh, here we have the dynamic process. Okay, cannot close the dynamic process. Cancel active dynamic process. So let's open up my theoretical 4-panel elements. Here we have the 4 panels. This is just the upper part of the California nebula, just divided into 4 different parts. So in this case, if you're going to use a regular PixInsight process, you would take the first panel, you would then register it, merge it with the second panel, and get one registered union mosaic. Use that to register the third panel, and then use that to make another registered union mosaic, and then you put in the 4th panel. And as you go up from, say, 4 panels to 6 panels to whatever number of panels you have, it can get pretty complicated. So I'm not going to do it that way. So we're going to close all of these 4 panels for the mosaic. And I'm going to go into Photoshop. Don't need this. And I'm going to open up panel 1. It's the 4 panel, panel 1. And so now I'm going to do the same thing here as I did for the 2 panel. I'm going to make this image bigger by stretching it out to the right and then stretching it out to the bottom. That is, I'm going to take the image, I'm going to increase the panel size, or increase the canvas size, I'm sorry. And so the width, instead of being 33,000 pixels, I'm going to make it, let's say, 6,000 pixels. And height, I'm going to make 5,000 pixels. And I'm going to make it from the upper left-hand corner to the right and from the upper left-hand corner down. So now my image will look like this. And this can be the reference image for a 4-panel mosaic, provided that your panels have overlapped sufficiently, which if you've done some planning, that should do it. So I'm going to save this as the...
Actually, that's a good point, Eric. So what should be the sufficient overlap between mosaics? What do you do?
I overlap them quite a bit. I would say at least 20%. I don't know if there's any rule about this. I'm sure it depends on your imaging setup, how the quality of your images, how many stars you have in order for PixInsight to make a registration. It depends on a lot of things that I'm really not familiar with, but I overlap about 20%. So this is now a reference image, and I can now reference this image to panel 1, upper left, panel 2, upper right, which you don't see, panel 3, and then panel 4. So let's close this down. Go back to PixInsight. Open up my 4-panel reference. Now, I'm going to use a star alignment tool. I'm going to use this image as my reference. And I'm going to put the other 3 panels. There's my 4-panel. The other 3 panels, or actually all the panels, the 4 panels, in to be aligned. And here they are, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to put it into the 4-panel folder right here. That's the folder I'm going to use. And I'm going to hit go. And now each of those panels is going to be referenced to this. And even though I don't have an image in this black area, I have enough of an overlap where it's going to be able to align each one. And when I get those aligned images, I'm going to go back to the gradient merge mosaic, put those 4 in. Let me just move over the little process console. I don't know if you can see it, but it's successfully aligned all 4. I don't need this anymore. Let's start over. Here's my gradient merge mosaic. I'm going to clear that. I'm going to put in the align files. I've done this before. So here are the 4 align files to the reference. Open those up. Hit the button. This may take a little bit longer. As you go up from 2 panels to 4 panels, I think the time increases exponentially. This may take about a minute. But see, once you go to the 4 panels and use this technique from Photoshop, it really becomes easier than doing it within PixInsight. For 2-panel, it's obviously easier to do it within PixInsight and not involve Photoshop. But for the 4-panel, if you have nicely overlapped images, it's really easier to do it using this expanded image technique in Photoshop. We're cruising along. I think we should be done in about 30 seconds. It's working on it. Are there any questions that have come up? And here we have a perfectly aligned mosaic. Now I expanded the image in Photoshop, so I have this blackened area, so I'll simply take the dynamic crop the image where I want. Expand it out. And there we have a perfect 4-panel mosaic with no seams whatsoever. Now I got to tell you, this is cheating a little bit because I took a single image and I cut it up. So that's not necessarily going to be quite as seamless if you do your own 4-panel. But the idea is really the same. That is, you take nice overlapping images. You take the one in the upper left or upper right or lower left, expand it out to the size of the image that you're going to eventually want to have, at least that big, even a little bigger. Reference all the images to that reference image, even though most of that is black, and then use the gradient merge mosaic with those aligned images to produce your mosaic. That's it. So that's your 2-panel and 4-panel mosaic technique. Are there any questions?
Yeah, so there's one question about your computer. Almiko is asking, what kind of computer do you use to process PixInsight, hard drive, RAM, processor?
This is a big Dell with 32 gigabytes of memory and solid state drives. As fast as I could reasonably afford, because some of these processes, especially like this Merge Mosaic, take a lot of processing power. When I did a 16-panel mosaic, when I was a little bit nuts one time, I think some of these merges took, like half an hour or so. And in that case, I had to build progressive images going from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, all the way up to 16. And keeping track of all those reference images, just got to be a real headache. But for a 4-panel mosaic, this is a relatively simple technique. The only thing you really got to be concerned about is make sure your images overlap enough that it's going to have enough reference stars. And make sure that the area that you're overlapping has stars in it. If you have a galaxy and you're doing a galaxy in an area which doesn't have stars as one of your panels, it won't reference.
I'm actually surprised that your first and fourth panel registered, because they don't have that much overlap between the first and fourth.
Yeah, they have about 20% overlap. They have enough stars in here. I've actually, when I cut this up, I said, well, how many stars do I need? And I got plenty of stars, at least for the demonstration. But you need stars for registration. So if you don't have a lot of stars in your overlap, you're not going to get registered. And what could happen, when I've done this before, is sometimes the upper right panel will register here, and this one will register here, and this one won't. In that case, then you build another reference image with those 3 panels, register the same 4 components to that second reference image, and then it works fine.
Right, that's exactly what I was talking about.
It's a bit of a shortcut.
Yeah, because like I said, the first and the fourth panels, they only have the little their 2 corners that overlap. So you're right. The trick is to build it, incrementally.
Actually, I'm trying to get away from building it incrementally, because if you can produce reference images to a reference image that will align with all your components, you can use the gradient merge mosaic as a process and not do it individually, and that's what I've done here. But you can see this. I mean, again, it's a little bit of a cheat because I started out with a whole image and cut it up. But you can see you've built a perfectly seamless image. And the only thing you can really see it's a flaw is I have a bad column down here, which kind of stands out. But I take care of that in Photoshop. And the last thing I think I'll show you is I did a Hubble palette image using this technique. And see, finished images. And this is the result.
Yeah, that looks really good.
And I might as well open the other one. So these are the 2. Gradient Merge Mosaic is a really great tool that they've come up with.
Yeah, most pictures, most images of California nebula, you don't see a lot of. They kind of look. It kind of looks like a cloud, with not much detail in it. In these, because they're higher resolution and they're mosaic, you can see a lot of detail.
Yeah, well, you actually get double the size of the image, so you do get a little bit more out of it. And plus, I had some really fine nights out of the SRO and a decent bit of equipment to work with. Any more questions that came up about this?
Yeah, there was a question about overlap again, but I think we covered that. It's 10% minimum, and then you said you do about 20%.
Yeah, I think I do 10%. I guess it depends on the density of your star field. PixInsight's pretty good as long as it has enough stars, even if you don't have a tremendous amount of overlap. I think 10% is kind of stretching it.
Yeah, it has to do with yeah, it has to do with number of stars. It's really not the percentage of overlap. It's how many stars there are in the overlap. If there are, you can do 50% overlap and no stars in it, it's not going to work.
Right. It depends on the density of your star field. And actually, these are HA images that you're seeing here. So you don't have as many stars to work with as you might in an luminosity image. But this worked out pretty well. I built one more. Why don't I bring that up? Another 2-panel. Let's see where that is. Let's see. This one's a little more dramatic. This is the molecular cloud in Perseus. So this one was actually much more difficult because the color of all these dust clouds as they went into one image or another were really kind of difficult to control. So this is NGC 1333 and the Perseus molecular cloud. And these are all posted on AstroBin if anyone wants to take a look at them. Tolga, okay?
Yeah, we're all good.
All right, so
are there any questions out? If you guys have any questions out in the chat, this is the time. So, Eric, are you done with your presentation?
Yeah, I'm done. You want me to stop sharing? I'm good.
Yeah. So for the rest of the show, I was thinking about I will talk about
Tolga.
Yes, sir.
Could we go into Jay's question right there real quick?
Sure. I didn't realize there was a question.
Yeah, I know. Well, for those of you who are out there, you have to understand that we actually have two different programs running to run a program here. And while you're actually giving a presentation, it's hard to look over at the other program to see the conversations that are going on. So we occasionally have to interrupt each other to say, hey, there's been a question over there. And the question was from J210 that he started using PixInsight and he's stuck in pre-batch processing with the pop-up saying cannot execute instance in the global context using a tip file. You're not using the, I don't think you're using the batch processing, batch pre-processing script. I don't think there's a choice there. But
no, there is no, you can't do, you're not executing it globally.
Yeah. So I think, can you pop up your screen and explain Eric, could you pop up your screen because I don't have PixInsight running, and you do there. Of course, we can't read your PixInsight; it's too small. The resolution's too high by the time we get it. Anyway, usually, there's three little icons down at the lower left, and you're pushing the wrong one. Just push the one next to it. I forget which one's which.
Well, for batch processing, you hit run.
Yeah, you hit run. So that's what I'm saying. Jay, you're not dealing with Jay's question comes whenever you get a cannot execute instance in the global context. That means that you're trying to execute it globally when it can only be done with a certain amount of data in a certain other space. And I don't have PixInsight running, so I can't really show you what that is. But just basically move over. Go ahead.
Can you read that? So now I bring up the batch pre-processing script. And basically, once you get all of your lights, flats, darks, and biases, the only thing you can really do here is run them.
Yeah.
There is no global button to push you.
Can you show them one of your other screens where you've got the three little icons down at the bottom? One of them duplicates the action. One of them is the global, and the other is the execute. I
have to exit out of this because this.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, hold on a sec.
Because I think that's where he is. He's not actually in batch pre-processing.
So here's the star
He's
alignment.
doing some of the intermediate steps in real processing. Or I may be wrong.
So here is just a star alignment, and you have your 3 buttons here. Apply global, apply to the active image, or you drag the little caret onto the image where you want to apply it, or make a new instance. So those are the 3 buttons, right? That's what you're talking about?
Yeah. So Jay, the suggestion is that you use one of the other buttons, and I think it'll just go right on through. Okay. One of the other execute buttons.
Well, there are some processes that you can't execute in the global. It just depends on the process.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tolga, back to you and image processing. Wait a minute. Okay, Jay, I'll talk to Jay over here on the message board. No, you were talking about remote imaging. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tolga.
Okay. So the way I categorize remote imaging is there are 3 types. There's the backyard remote, there is a commercial establishment remote, and then there is the type of remote that Terry Robinson does in Australia, where that's like Mars rover remote. So there are 3 different types. I'm more familiar with the backyard and the commercial establishments such as Sierra Remote Observatories or Deep Sky West or Grand Mesa Observatory. I work with all 3 of those places. And the most important thing is what I recommend is to have your system running at home. And then you take it down exactly the way it is, 100% running, that you have all your cables, all your connectors, all your adapters, and then you box them right there, and then you ship them out to the remote observatory. And then the second thing is you use the best cables, best connectors you can find, gold-plated if you can find them, because you're going to have failures. One trick I use is Vaseline around the USB connectors. Vaseline is not for conductivity, for electrical, but it's actually for prevent air to get in touch with metal for between the connectors, so that it doesn't corrode. And we definitely need some sort of a method to recycle our devices. I use a switch called Digilogger switch, which allows me to cycle the power to the 120 volt power supplies to either the computer, the camera, everything individually. Because we're going to have problems. We're going to have USB problems. You're going to have power problems. Your computer's going to hang up. We need a way to get out of those. You can't keep calling your local support. And even if your observatory in the backyard is, you're not going to get out of bed 2 o'clock in the morning and go over there and reset and power. So all these things need to be thought about. Another thing is, reliable equipment. You just use the best equipment. Do your research. Use the best equipment possible. Equipment that allows you to get out of trouble. Webcams are another important factor. You need eyes. You need eyes at your equipment to see what's going on. As far as software, again, you need reliable ASCOM drivers. You need a automation software that's just not going to throw their hands up and says, "Okay, I don't know what's happening." You need ways to get out of trouble. And a lot of these remote observatories, they provide installation services. They don't normally, none of them usually do it for free. You have to pay them. But then again, for them to install your system, it needs to be working. So if you're designing a system from ground up with brand new equipment, that's a lot of risk. Because if you're missing one little connector, you're out of commission. You can't work. If, let's say, if you're missing the connector between your focuser and your camera, you can't install. You're done. You're gonna wait, and most of these adapters are not readily available. So you're looking at 2 weeks to get one, including shipping. So the best thing to do is to assemble it at home, and then assemble it, take it down, don't put it back in storage, go straight into boxes, shipping boxes, and then ship to your remote observatory. And of course, Terry just mentioned about spares, spare cables. You know, have spare 2 cables of everything, because cables are going to go bad. There are no cables that don't go bad. They're going to go bad. Power supplies are going to go bad. USB cables are going to go bad. Obviously, we have to stop somewhere. We can't have spare cameras and spare mounts and just waiting to be replaced. But if it's affordable, you know, if it's a USB hub or a cable, tie wrap, things like that, just pack double of all that stuff. I know some people have dual cameras. They just because they're paying for their peers, and you know, they're paying thousands of dollars rental for if they're out for 4 weeks, that's just waste of money. So if they have a spare camera, they'll have it ready over there for the on-site tech could just replace it, and while you wait for your camera to be repaired, you could be using your second camera. I mean, I know not everybody could do that, but again, you have to consider the cost factor of what you're paying for the rental. What else? Are there any questions about this? Because I don't know what else to say.
Tolga, you and I were having a conversation the other day about why I don't recommend people who have big expensive rigs using SGP. Okay. Let's just say using one particular program. And I made the comment that I think people that are spending $1,500 a month to rent an observatory someplace and all that other stuff, I think that they're going to have a bulletproof system that that you just are, you know, you never have to worry about it. It's always going to work, and if it doesn't work, it fixes itself and keeps on going. And you said
you remember my comment about that, right?
And that was an introduction for you to get going.
Okay, so you're familiar with SGP, and you think SGP fails. Everything fails. There's nothing that doesn't fail. And you know, I have a lot of experience with this. I've been remote imaging for a while, and then I help set up other people. I install remote systems. That's part of my part of what I do, and I've never seen a system that doesn't fail. Just completely robust, that works 100% of the time. There are ones that are more reliable than others, and we do some tricks to make them more reliable than they're designed to be. I personally use ACP, including, you know, with Maxim and then Focus Max. I believe Eric uses ACP as well. For a rental place, I mean, if you're paying that much money to rent a pier, I would recommend ACP over anything else. And that's just a fact that, again, because you're paying. If it was a backyard, I wouldn't be so pushy about the ACP, and I wouldn't insist on it that much. But if you're paying, you know, thousands of dollars for your pier, and you know, I want it working. If it's clear, I want it running. So if I'm out with my friends, you know, I'm out the dinner party, I want it to start by itself. I don't have to worry about, I don't want to leave the dinner table and go start my system and come back to dinner. So, or, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But, I wouldn't play SGP. That's an amazing software. For $100, there's nothing out there that does what it does. It brought, why I like SGP? It brought a ton of people into this hobby that otherwise couldn't afford. Because before SGP, you had to have the smallest software you had to have was $1,000. I'm not going to name names, but you had to have this one, that one, and that one, and that one, and you needed to automate it, and you put it all together, you were $1,000. And SGP brought a whole group of people into our hobby, which I love it. Do you agree, Alex? Alex, you there?
Okay, remember how I said that I get lost in between programs? I have muted my mic there because I was typing to Jay to explain something.
Oh, okay.
And those of you reading through the message things, did I get that message to Jay correct? That what he really wants to do is skip batch pre-processing. He's not using calibration frames. And the whole point of batch pre-processing is to calibrate. And so if you're not using batch calibration frames, you don't need to use batch pre-processing. What you need to do, assuming that you're happy with whatever data you've got, and fine, and if it works, it works, is you need to register all your images so that they are in fact the same image, they look the same all the way through, and then you need to stack them, which is integrate them. So you need two separate operations. The first operation is to register, then you come back and use process image integration, and then you will have, if you're doing one-shot color, you'll have one master image that you can then go and do the fine processing, the background, the noise, the stretching, and all that other stuff. If you've got filters and you have to do L, R, G, and B, well, then you're going to have 4 sets of everything, but you still got 4 sets of everything. And then you go into the formal combination of the RGB and the combination of, and clean up the L and put them all together like you've seen people do all the time. But Jay, your issue is that you shouldn't be in batch pre-processing if you're not going to be doing the calibration frames. And I think I've got that right. Remember, I'm just like you. I kind of struggle with a lot of these things myself. Somebody can correct me. But back to what Tolga was saying. Yeah, that was the point that I was getting. It was a couple, 3 weeks ago, we were doing something about SGP. And I was talking with Olga outside the show. And
who's Olga?
I mean, Tolga, Olga. Never mind. I can tell you who Olga is too, but that's a whole different thing. I was talking with Tolga, and he just said, "No, Alex, you're dreaming." What is the name of the error, the equipment error that the big fancy one gives you? It sounds so much better than when SGP just goes, well, I don't know what's happening, or whatever it says. There's an error that it gives, equipment failure or something like that. Look, I'm not sure that all these equipment failures that we get out of SGP are in fact equipment failures, or just SGP got confused. And I think the same thing is probably true out of ACP and any other piece of software out there. I think that there was something unexpected happened in our software, and it may be because somebody tripped over a USB cable, but it may also be that something came up in a configuration in a piece of driver or something like that nobody anticipated. Tolga, is there a way you can just shut down the whole system and start over? You were saying something about that too, I think.
What do you?
Well,
you mean
something like, in most cases, okay, if I'm sitting there with SGP and something screws up like that, quite often you just shut the system down and start up again. You know?
Yeah, that's pretty much what you do with all of them.
With all of them, yeah. And I'm thinking that's an
And-
SGP thing. No, it's not an SGP thing. It's an everything thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're again, like if your USB cable, if your camera's USB cable disconnects, there's no software that's going to get you out of it. If you're, you know, if cloud goes by and your plate style fails, it's, you know, you're done. That has that's not, you know, software is not gonna. They do the best they can. In some of them, do a better job of recovering from trying more, or, you know, okay, there's some software does this. Okay, there's a problem right now. I see there's a problem. Okay, I'll just sleep for 5 minutes and they'll come back and try again. Or let me just go over to a different part of the sky and try something else. So some software does things like that to recover. But, you know, if your guide camera doesn't work, what are you going to do?
Well, like with SGP, when the cloud comes, it says, "Hey, I can't see anything. Something's screwy here. You know, the guider is lost because it can't see through the clouds. So just stop. Wait for 5 minutes or 8 minutes. You can reconfigure whatever the recovery is supposed to be, and let's try it again." And then it goes out and does a plate solve, figures out where it is. And if it can't figure out where it is, it says, "Whoop, cloud's still here." So it'll do that kind of stuff. But some other things, it doesn't. You know, it can't do anything about it, so it's just lost.
Right.
But
And
we need to.
in those things, the only way to do is either reboot your computer or recycle your USB power to the equipment. So ACP allows you to do things like that. Like, you know, you could have a little script to recycle things and then try it again. But again, sometimes you have to go there. Not go there physically, but sometimes you have to be involved. And sometimes, and there are other things, somebody has to be there to get you out.
I think we need to do a show sometimes, formally prepared. We knew that Eric was going to talk tonight for a while, and then we were going to say some things about the remote imaging and automated imaging. And this is kind of an outgrowth of our SGP conversation from 2 or 3 weeks ago. But at any rate, I think we need to do more about this. And we would really appreciate if somebody's got some experience out there with building remote observatories and bulletproofing them. If they could contact us, contact@theastroimagingchannel.com is the email to use. Contact us and offer to come on in and share some of the expertise that you've developed through the years. We're also looking for somebody who has successfully grabbed some pictures off the comet that just came by and tell us how you did it, what we need to do to process it, things like that. Those are 2 shows that we know we need to do. And I'm not sure that, well, you know, we need some other volunteers to come on and help us do that. So if you'd all like to get in on that, send us an email at contact@theastroimagingchannel.com. Okay.
And by the way, should we talk about next week? Next week is Gaston Baudet is coming from Innovations Foresight. He's going to be doing a presentation. And the 2 weeks after that, we're taking off.
Yeah, it's going to be Christmas and Happy New Year and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa and cool things like that.
So we're going to be off for 2 weeks, and then we'll be back the first Sunday of January, which will be
sometime in January.
Right. I'm just looking at the calendar. 6th, which I won't be here, but you guys will.
Okay. Thank you, Tolga, for running the show.
My pleasure. I hope we did a good job. The first time without Adam.
Good night,
All
everybody.
right, good night, everyone. And we'll see you next week with Gaston Baudet with Innovation Foresight.